Following Polk County, this is today's veteran. I'm Chris Drummond, and on behalf of the entire Polk County Office of Veteran Services, welcome. On today's program, we look at the latest changes to several VA programs that may affect you, and I get the unique opportunity to sit down with Congressman Dennis Ross. The Polk County native and representative of Florida's 12th Congressional District shares with us how he earned the reputation of being one of the most veteran-friendly members of Congress, as well as what he's doing to keep that title. But first, prepare to copy, Polk County. Your sit rep is to follow. In the last sit rep, I told you about the newest addition to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Education Program lineup. The inaugural class of the Veterans Reemployment Assistance Program, or VRAP, began training on 1 July, and of the 45,000 seats available, only 37,000 and change have been filled. Applications are currently being accepted for the next training period beginning 1 October. If you're interested in the VRAP or know someone who may meet the qualifying criteria, please visit the program website at www.benefits.va.gov/VAL. I can't encourage you enough, folks. Please visit this site. Without sufficient participation, programs like this simply dry up, and those veterans who genuinely benefit from them lose this resource. Aside from the VRAP, July was a big month for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and their push to reform the compensation and pension claims process. In a move specifically targeting compensation claims, the VA has fielded a new processing model at 16 of its regional offices across the country. This new model divides compensation claims into 3 categories. Express claims are claims with only 1 or 2 medical conditions, or those claims with all the necessary medical and service evidence present. These are often referred to as fully developed claims. The next classification are special operations. Special operations are claims that require special handling because of the often unique circumstances of the veteran. These claims include financial hardship, homelessness, serious wounds, injuries or illnesses, post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of military sexual trauma, and former prisoner of war status. The third class, core claims, are claims with more than 2 medical conditions or any claim needing additional medical and/or service information in order to deliver a rating decision. It's hoped that this segmented approach will help increase speed and accuracy in making rating decisions and will ultimately help eliminate the backlog of claims currently in process at VA regional offices and pension management centers nationwide. If successful, the program will be implemented in all VA field offices over the next 2 years. The VA continues their fight in the campaign to end veterans' homelessness this summer. On 17 July 2012, Secretary of Veterans Affairs Eric Shinseki announced the award of nearly $100 million in grants as part of the Supportive Services for Veterans Families program, or the SSVF. The funds are aimed at assisting nearly 42,000 homeless and at-risk veterans and their families. Under this program, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs is awarding grants to 151 private, nonprofit organizations and consumer cooperatives in 49 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. They provide services to very low-income veteran families who are homeless, at risk of becoming homeless, live in temporary housing, or are transitioning to permanent housing accommodations. For more information on the SSVF and other VA-administered programs targeting veterans' families in need, please visit their website at www.va.gov/homelessness. We end our sit rep today with where the journey of every veteran begins. Separation from the military can be a time of cautious optimism and circumspect excitement about the opportunities that lay ahead. In response to the President's call to ensure that every separating veteran is career ready when they leave the military, an interagency team from the U.S. Departments of Defense, Veterans Affairs, Labor, Education, and Homeland Security, as well as the Office of Personnel and Management and the Small Business Administration, announced on July 23rd of this year the launch of a redesigned transition assistance program called Transition GPS. While details of this new program are yet unavailable, all the agencies involved in its creation have expressed their optimism that Transition GPS will produce the most skillful and resourceful generation of veterans this nation has ever seen. As part of an ongoing series here at Today's Veteran, we sit down with members of our state and federal congressional delegation and talk veterans issues. Joining us today is Congressman Dennis Ross. Central Florida's native son is going to sit down and talk with us a little bit about what he's done in the U.S. House of Representatives for veterans and some of his own personal experiences as the son of a veteran. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Getting right to it, Congressman, what veterans or veterans-dependent specific services can your office offer?
Well, our office acts as a conduit between veterans and federal agencies, not only the Veterans Administration, the Department of Defense, but also Social Security, Medicare, or any agency involving the federal government. We are out there to be the ones to hopefully break down the barriers of red tape so that our veterans, our citizens, can get their answers from the federal government.
Fantastic. What does your office do to support local veterans community, service organizations, charity events, things like that, sir?
We do several things. One of the things we do is we do hold veterans fairs, which brings together the veterans groups, the Veterans Administration, the VFW, the American Legion, all these groups together to make sure that they're getting the information necessary to find out what resources are available to veterans and to active duty military. We also support and have engaged in supporting the honor flights, which transport World War II veterans from all areas of the country to Washington, D.C. to visit the World War II Memorial. We do job fairs involving veterans, and we also do a Veterans History Project that I think is very fascinating. It allows the youth that are in our school system here in Polk County to videotape, under requirements of the Department of Defense, those veterans who served in all conflicts from World War II up to the present. These are archived in the Library of Congress. It's the history, it's the stories given firsthand by the veterans themselves, and then we're going to make them available, of course, on our website for the next generation to learn from.
Fantastic. Should there be any veterans out there who are interested in either the honor flight or this history project, would you mind providing us with either a website?
Yes, if you don't mind, I'd be happy to do that. I can give you our phone number right offhand for our district office. It's 863-644-8215, and we're on the web at dennisross.house.gov.
Now, I can't cite the specific number, Congressman, and I do apologize, but Florida is in the top 5 states for active duty military members calling it home.
Correct.
Since we do have so many active duty military members, and even with one war over and another one drawing down, we have a lot of members who are deployed, members of the Guard, members of the Reserve Force, and active duty service members. What does your office do for those active duty service members, activated reservists and guardsmen, and their families?
Well, we do several things. First of all, we want to make sure that when they come back from their deployment, that there's a seamless transition into their lives that they left. That means making sure that they've got proper health care benefits, that there's assimilation for workforce, that we make sure that whatever barriers there may be with the Veterans Administration, we can run interference for. We need to also make sure that while they are deployed, that their families are taken care of. We need to make sure that their families don't fall victim to fraudulent scams, and that their packages that are shipped to them are appropriately and timely delivered. So we try to make sure that we run interference, if you will, for all the veterans' families, whether they be on active duty or returning back into civilian life.
That's wonderful. You've got a reputation around Lakeland, around Central Florida, as being a true friend to the veteran, if you will, if that's not too cliche, in Washington, D.C. What legislative issues have you been a part of since joining the U.S. House?
Well, one of the first things that I joined onto was the Ensuring Military Pay Act, because it became appalling to me that when we were having the negotiations over our budget and the debt ceiling, that we were going to put on the table the military pay for active duty military and say that if we shut down the government, then they don't get paid. That's absurd. That is inappropriate and intolerable. And one of the things I wanted to make sure is that we do not use our active duty military as a bargaining chip in the budget negotiations. So this Ensuring Military Pay Act would have provided that military personnel, without any interruption at all, receive and continue to receive their pay, despite the fact that Congress can't seem to come to an agreement on their budget. I thought that was very important. The other area that I've been very active in is making sure that we maintain the levels of care under TRICARE without any cuts proposed by this president to require more military personnel and veterans to pay more for their care. The military veterans put their lives on the line. They've been promised health care under the TRICARE program. We need to make sure we uphold that promise to them. We also, I've been involved in Social Security legislation to make sure that the the Social Security recipients receive what is promised them, and the same under Medicare. We're coming into sequestration, which is the automatic cuts into Department of Defense and Medicare as of January of this year, and unfortunately, we're going to make cuts in areas that we shouldn't be making cuts. We don't need to be taking away from our veterans. We don't need to be taking away from our elderly population. We need to look at what areas of government is providing funding and appropriations that is not essential government function and cut those and maintain our level of funding to those who deserve it most, which of course are our veterans.
Agreed. Sounds fantastic. Before you had come in today, we had talked a little bit about legislation that was passed about 5 years ago as part of the Defense Authorization Act. Could you tell us a little bit about that Authorization Act, specifically the portion that applies to retirees and their TRICARE, and your thoughts on that?
Yes, this particular act that was passed in '07 would require, and does require, that those personnel that are on TRICARE who go into the market and are hired by a private employer can no longer elect to keep their TRICARE if the employer provides incentives for them to do so. It was a great program to allow for an employer to incentivize hiring of military personnel who wanted to keep TRICARE, because the employer could then pay additional compensation to the worker. They could pay supplemental benefits in addition to TRICARE. Unfortunately, now under this act, the employer can't do that. The employee, the military employee, has to choose either TRICARE or the employer-funded health care, and both lose on that, because the TRICARE is something that is probably one of the best health care programs that we have out there that is administered by this government. If the employer can provide incentives to this employee, who can then use this money to do other things that they deem appropriate, and the employer can save some money, it's a great partnership. Plus, it incentivizes the hiring of veterans, which to me is one of the most important things that we as a country can do. For those people who put their lives on the line, who've taken an oath to sacrifice everything they have, we ought to be able to give them some incentives to come back to work and assimilate into the job market.
I hope more than just what you're saying, that your energy for this particular topic, veterans benefits as a whole, really comes across the television screen, and I hope people understand that they do have someone in Washington like yourself that is so enthusiastic and such an ardent supporter of veterans benefits.
Well, as the son and the grandson of veterans and the brother of veterans, I have an obligation to do that.
I see no more perfect a segue into your history and your relationship with the veteran community. Although you are not a service member, a veteran yourself, but as you had mentioned, you were the son of a veteran. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your dad?
Sure. He was in World War II in the Navy as a signalman, stationed on the USS Macaulay, which was a troop transport that was in the South Pacific. It was they would ferry the Marines to the islands, including the Battle of Guadalcanal. Just after the Battle of Guadalcanal, in June, I want to say 43 or maybe 44, 43 I believe it was, his ship was attacked by torpedo bombers, dive bombers, and was hit. He volunteered to stay back and try to salvage the ship, but unfortunately the ship was unsalvageable and they scuttled it, and he then made his way back over to the rescue ship. After that, he came back, settled in Florida under the GI Bill, got his degree in accounting from Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, moved to Florida with my mom, who was a nurse in World War II, and then raised 5 children. 3 of my brothers all served in the military, and my sister and I did not. But I have a tremendous affection for those who did what they did when they returned from World War II and made this country second to none in this world. And they truly are the greatest generation. I'll never forget that. I can only hope that the generation that succeeds me and my children will have just as great of opportunities as I had when my parents were raising me.
That's great. Being the son of a veteran, did you have a lot of interaction with local veterans organizations or even veteran services here at the county or state or federal
Not as
level?
much. My father was a member of the VFW. He was a member of the American Legion. I was recognized as a high school student and an elementary student for American Legion awards, so I had a chance to tour and visit the American Legions that were here in Lakeland. I've spoken to the VFW in Winter Haven, and have worked with the disabled American veterans as well. But growing up here, the veterans were always at the forefront of doing our national holidays, celebrations, whether it be 4th of July, Washington's birthday back then. They were always made part of it, either in the parades or as a color guard, but definitely in terms of recognition.
That's fantastic. Since becoming a member of Congress, Mr. Ross, seeing it from the insider's perspective now versus the outside, how would you rate the federal government? How do you think we do in providing care? I would say benefits, but I think care is a better word, because whether it be education, health care, housing, homeless assistance, what have you, I truly think it all comes down to care. How do you think we care for our veterans?
Not near as well as we should. You know, the one thing constitutionally that we have an obligation to do is to provide for the common defense. And providing for the common defense not only means that we have to make sure that we are not attacked from without, but those who provide that protection are taken care of because they've put their lives on the line. They've raised their hand and given the oath for the ultimate sacrifice. We need to make sure that we continue to provide those benefits that we've promised them throughout their lives. Back in the 60s, 50% of our federal budget went to the Department of Defense, which went to veterans, which went to active duty military personnel. Today, only 25% of our budget goes to Department of Defense and military. The reason being is we've created so much more layers of government to provide benefits well beyond those that are in need or those that are entitled because of their service to our country. We need to cut back on those services that don't involve the military, that don't involve essential government functions. We are a country of limited government. That which we must do under our Constitution, those who have put their ultimate lives on the line that need to be taken care of, we need to take care of. Those things that can be delegated to the states or to the private sector, the federal government needs to get out of. We're spending more money than we've ever spent before, and yet we're giving less to those who are more deserving, and those are our veterans groups. To me, I wish we would continue to revere those who served in military. Public safety and defense are some of the most important government functions that we have, those who put their lives on the line. Not everybody that works for the federal government is in that category. Not everybody who is an American citizen is in that category. We need to make sure that we revere those who have put their their lives on the line, the ultimate sacrifice.
Now, you're in your first term, is that correct, sir?
Correct.
Okay, so that means roughly July 2 years ago, you were not yet Congressman Ross. You were simply Dennis Ross, local businessman and community activist. How has your view, the view that you just shared with us on veterans benefits and the mechanisms in place to care for those benefits, how has that changed from when you were 2 years ago simply Dennis Ross to now Congressman Ross having the ability to make change if change is indeed needed?
Well, changes are needed. And one of the things that I've heard, but that I appreciate more than ever now that I'm a member of Congress, is that it's not the minister that has saved our country. It's not the press that saved our country. It's the vigilant soldier who has stood guard for 236 years of this country that has saved our country, that has given us the right for the freedom of religion, that has given us the right of the freedom of press. To me, those were just cliches and sayings until you get a chance to really see in Washington, D.C., not only the monuments that are there that recognize the valiant service and sacrifices of our military personnel, but when you also see that the benefits that government provides, that since the Revolutionary War, our first obligations were to the veterans, were to those who fought. And I think that we sometimes lose sight of that. And we can talk about this in history books, but serving in Congress for the last 2 years has truly allowed me to experience that. And I think that the veterans today, that those who have probably been part of the greatest military that mankind has ever seen, when they come back here, we need to make sure that we as a Congress are not using them as bargaining chips, not using them as political footballs, but rather giving to them what they so richly deserve, and that's the benefits that we've promised them. That's the assimilation into a strong workforce. That's to make sure that their families are taken care of regardless of what happens to them. Those are issues that me as a congressman have probably taken to heart more so now serving in Congress than when I was on the campaign trail.
All right. Well, sir, it's been a pleasure. I'll go ahead and give you the option of any parting shots. The floor is yours.
No, let me tell you, being in Congress is a tremendous opportunity. It's very much a job. It's a duty. I take it very seriously. I don't take it as a career. It is a chapter in my life, not a book. But when I have a chance to stand next to a veteran, it is very humbling for me for what the service that I provide my country is not near as great as those who have worn the uniform of our military and have, again, taken the oath to give the ultimate sacrifice. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to share some of my thoughts.
Thank you.
I'm Emory Allen Eason. I was just before being drafted and decided to join the military and get something out of it. So I talked to a friend of mine who had just got back from Turkey, and he said, a warrant officer pilot is the best thing going. So I took the test, waited forever to get an allocation, and finally went to basic training. From basic training, I went to flight school, which is 9 months. And from flight school, I went to Vietnam. When you get assigned to the big Vietnam, there's a bunch of units you don't want to go to. The CAV is one of them. But so be it. I wound up with the CAV. And when I went to the CAV, I went to a unit that flew the commanders. Therefore, you weren't regimented to pick up troops, take them somewhere and discharge, go back and sit and wait. In my unit, when Colonel got done with you, you were more or less on your own. So consequently, I got allocated a lot of things that I really wasn't supposed to be doing, but I did it because I was the colonel pilot, and the colonel wanted these things done, so I did them for him, and he did for me. Consequently, I came back from Vietnam with 6 ribbons for valor. And after I got back to the States, I was flying at Fort Ruck, Alabama as a flight instructor. And I got hurt in an automobile accident. That accident put me off and on at Walter Reed for a couple of years. And I decided that just before the accident happened to me, I said, hey, Sam, I'll stay for 20 if you want me. He says, okay, we'll keep you. So I had this accident, and I was at Walter Reed as an indefinite warrant officer, which meant I was already locked in for 20. And I decided, or they decided, hey, you're holding a warrant officer slot, you can resign. You're holding a pilot slot and can't fly, you can resign. I said, check it out, I'll not resign. So consequently, they come back to me 3 years later and say, we'll give you disability retirement. And that disability retirement, I went from, with the disability retirement, I went to civil service. So I went to civil service working with the VA, Department of the Army, Department of the Air Force, and retired with the FAA. I spent my last 10 years with the FAA in Atlanta. I went to the Pentagon after Department of the Air Force, and I was just a low-level guy at the Pentagon. Met a couple of generals. As when I was with the CAV in Vietnam, flying the commanders around, I made some high-roller friends. They were lieutenant colonels and colonels at the time. But when we got to the Pentagon, they were stars. They had stars. I met the guy going down the hall, and he says, I let him get about 4 feet behind me, and I said, Colonel Vaught? And he straightens up, and he's got 3 stars on by that time. He retired with 4, I believe. There was an episode with him where I got him out of the Oshawa Valley with a broken back. They had already written him off, more or less. The battalion sergeant with him says he's going to die if somebody don't get him. I said, I don't want to do this. And so my boss finally came to me and said, look, you know where you left him? I said, I know by where I left him. So why don't you pick the ships you want and the crews you want and go get him? Being smart, I think I was still a W1 by that time. The low man on the pole. So I said, I tell you what I'll do. I'll go if you go, to my boss. He was a West Point major by that time. And when we went, we got him, got back. The colonel knows who got him. The major turns out to retire with 2 stars. I just buried him in May at Arlington. We went up and had a big ceremony at Arlington for him. And I made some high road friends in the Kia. And the Army fixes you for life. If you aren't just absolutely don't care about it, the Army fixes you for life. And like I said, I enjoy being a service officer at this post. I enjoy helping people get benefits that they are entitled to, that they just don't know about.
I'm Jack Williams from VFW Post 4289 here in Winter Haven. I first entered the Navy in 1971 at the end of Vietnam. I did not participate in Vietnam. My first ship was USS Nimitz as a commissioning crew, brought the ship into commission, and then followed on with a career as being a steam plant engineer on the naval ships, basically doing the water power and lights. I had a secondary MOS as military police. I totaled with 22 years military service. I was quite fortunate that 13 years was overseas service, primarily in the Middle East and Asia. And I met my wife over there. I wasn't in any major conflicts. We were in a lot of the small saber-rattling areas. My unit participated in the evacuation of the civilians that were in Iran during the hostage crisis.
My name's Gary Clark, and I have the honor of chairing the Polk County Veterans Council. I'm also a member of AMVETS, the American Legion, VFW, and also the Military Officers Association. I serve on the National Board of Directors of the Military Officers Association. I spent 26 years on active duty. I was commissioned out of Kansas State University in 1967. I was in Vietnam during Linebacker 2. I was assigned to both initially to Task Force Alpha, and then subsequently to the 56th Special Ops Wing, and then 7th Air Force. Following that, I had multiple assignments in the States, including the Pentagon for 4 years, and then I was also in Desert Storm, assigned to CENTCOM headquarters during Desert Storm, and deployed in Saudi Arabia and areas in the Middle East. With the activities that I'm involved in, we campaign for strong national defense and remind people of what it takes to preserve freedom in our nation. And we particularly work a lot with the younger folks, the JROTC programs here in Polk County. We have currently in excess of 3,000 young people who are involved in JROTC, where they learn the essential elements of citizenship. And national security is not just a function of the number of planes and tanks and guns and bullets that you have, but it's also a function of the character of the citizenry. And what we try to do is emphasize the importance of strong character within these programs. And it's an honor for me to be able to participate in these ways and to work with other veterans organizations and other veterans in pursuing these objectives.
This has been today's Veteran for August 2012. Be sure to be here next month when I take you inside the 2012 Warrior Walk. And I'm joined in studio by Staff Sergeant Jonathan Correa. Staff Sergeant Correa is a Lake Wales Army recruiter and the latest non-commissioned professional to be inducted into the elite Sergeant Audie Murphy Club. Once again, for the Polk County Office of Veteran Services, I'm Chris Drummond, and I'll see you in the trenches.